Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have Vicki Paris Goodman with me. Hey, Vicki.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you for having me.
Yes, so excited to have you on. And just so people can know you, I'm going to read your bio. So, Vicki Paris Goodman is the author of To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. After the death in 2019 of her husband Sam, the love of her life, she was unexpectedly flooded with optimism and presented with a host of possibilities for an exciting and meaningful future. She received valuable insights, seemingly coming from an outside source, enabling her to conceive a more realistic and uplifting understanding of death and loss. She knows these concepts will free others to face the passing of a loved one with a far more optimistic outlook. Having lived most of her life in the Los Angeles area, Miss Goodman now resides in Prescott, Arizona. She is a retired mechanical engineer. She sings and plays violin semi-professionally, and for over 20 years, she has served as Long Beach, California area newspaper as a theater critic. She is currently writing her second book, Speed Bumps and Other Impediments to Life in the Fast Lane, a slightly self-depreciating treatise on the trials of life, especially from the point of view of a type A personality. That sounds like it's going to be a good book, and I love the names of both of your books. So very well done on the creativity there. I love that.
Thank you. I especially love speed bumps and other impediments to life in the fast lane. I think that was brilliant on my
I
part, and
think it's
I don't
really
have a lot of moments of brilliance, so that was a good one.
that is awesome. So tell us your story from your perspective. I mean, there was a lot of life happening before all this happened.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much more life there was after Sam passed. I don't really talk about it as death anymore. I've kind of evolved since I've started this process, because it's become clear to me that there's an beautiful afterlife that souls go to spend, I guess it's eternity, but with God. And what's stunning about the entire story is that I was raised in a completely secular family. My parents and grandparents thought people who believed in a higher power were foolish and weak. And so this is what I grew up with. And some years before Sam passed, I had begun to believe in a higher power because nothing else made sense to me. I look around and I say, this can't have just happened on its own. But I hadn't taken that belief very far. And when Sam passed, suddenly I had his continuing existence at stake, and I wanted to know more. And serendipitous things started to happen. For example, I started asking questions about the afterlife, and the hospice chaplain who I had access to for some time after Sam passed, we would see each other once a month. I started asking her a lot of questions about the afterlife, and she recommended the story of a secular neurosurgeon who had been in a coma for 7 days because of massive brain infection that he had had no way to acquire, but he did. And he had a near-death experience that he writes about in this book. I've since read a few more near-death experiences. They have a lot in common, which lends credibility to them. But the point, the main point here being that in reading this neurosurgeon's story of his near-death experience, it brought me the rest of the way to fully believing in God and an afterlife. And so many wonderful things happened after that. But let me back up to the day Sam passed, because really, the really unexpected things started happening then. On the day Sam passed, I was in a little bit of shock, even though we had 2 years to get used to the notion that he wasn't going to live too much longer. What happened that day was very unexpected. I was suddenly flooded with optimism, and it was unseemly. He had passed earlier that morning, And here I was seeing, sunlight coming through the clouds on what I thought would be the worst day of my life.
Mm.
And I initially thought, oh no, it's too soon. I need to push this away. But then I thought, I was pretty strong during our 2-year ordeal, and I took very good care of Sam at the end when he needed taking care of. And that's not my nature to be a caregiver, but I would have done anything for Sam. So I thought, okay, maybe if good things want to come my way, I should let them. And it was the best decision I could have made because everything that happened after that was sort of divinely inspired. For example, insights started coming to me, and we'll talk about some of these, Kimberly. Possibilities to do things that maybe I couldn't have done if Sam had lived longer started coming my way, and I felt motivated to embrace them. Places that I wanted to travel that I know Sam wouldn't have wanted to go. Like, for example, I went to Antarctica, on an expedition cruise. Suddenly I had this sense of adventure that had kind of been smothered, so to speak. So it wasn't my first choice life, but it was a great second choice alternative to my life with Sam, which I didn't have available to me anymore. Some friends said, Vicki, listen, we have a great group of friends. It happens to be our karaoke group. Why don't you come? You don't have to sing, but I really think you'd love meeting these people. They would love you, and it was very flattering. And I thought, okay, I'll go. So I went and I noticed, and they were a great group of people. And now many of them are good friends. So that was a blessing in and of itself. But what was funny about it is when I went that first time, there was nobody was really watching the person singing. They were eating and drinking and gabbing, and nobody was paying attention. So I thought, well, this is pretty safe. I know I can carry a tune. I just don't have much of a voice in terms of power, but I won't embarrass myself too much and nobody's watching. So I gave the karaoke jockey a song choice, and it turned out I could really sing. And it just got better and better as I kept going to, meet with the karaoke group. So now I sing in public sometimes. It really became something I love. So, life has been sort of great overall. It's not that I didn't grieve. I did. But the insights that began to come to me, Kimberly, were I don't think they came from within me. I believe God has sort of chosen me to be the messenger of some of these insights so that people don't grieve so hard and so long. One of the insights is about death, which I don't really say death anymore, as I said, because the soul doesn't die, the body does, and the brain does. So I say, is death really tragic? And I say no. Because if you believe in a loving God and an exquisite afterlife, and if you believe that God has a plan for each one of us, then when someone you love passes, all that really means is that God's plan for them was to go to the afterlife now ahead of you, and that you have more to do, more things to learn, perhaps more things to teach others, more things to experience before you go and join your loved one in the afterlife. I don't see what's so terrible about that. Now, the part of Sam's passing that really did throw me, and I think it's human nature for us to fear the unknown and uncertainty, to fear uncertainty, was what was going to happen to my life. Yes, these opportunities started coming my way almost immediately, but still it was all just a lot. And Sam was gone. Suddenly I was alone in my house. And, I had to reconcile all those changes. So, what I did, and this came sort of instinctively to me, I decided to strike a balance between all these wonderful new activities I was doing and alone time. People often tell people who have lost someone to keep yourself as busy as possible so you don't have time to think or feel. I ignored that well-intended advice because I knew that it wasn't the right thing. I knew I needed to process what had happened to my life in Sam's, from Sam's passing. So I did. I struck this great balance of, time to process and time to have fun and to see, have meet a friend for lunch, go to karaoke. Another thing that happened was that I got an email announcing auditions for a staged reading at our community playhouse. Now, for over 20 years in Long Beach, California, I had reviewed theater for the local paper, but I'd never acted in a play and a staged reading where I knew we'd have scripts on stage. You have to learn your lines, but you don't have to memorize all of them. So I thought, wow, I'll do that. So I go to this audition and I almost left without auditioning. People that went before me sounded so experienced and polished. And I thought, no, no, I can't do this. But then I thought, you know what, Vicki, what do you have to lose? I wind up getting the female lead. Like I said, it was all divinely inspired for at least a year after Sam passed. I had the time of my life. So this is how I proceeded forward. And after 2 years of all of this, I looked back on it all and I said, you're a decent writer. You wrote theater reviews for all these years. You can write a book about this to try and help other people. So I did. And the book is actually very uplifting. Everybody says they expected to read something kind of depressing. And they said it wasn't depressing at all. There were a couple parts in the middle where you're talking about Sam's diagnosis and passing where I shed a tear, they say. But for the most part, the book is uplifting, even funny in places. And I'm proud of having accomplished that because that's what I set out to do. And then the final third or so, where I'm talking about all these things that happened for me after Sam passed, of course, that's uplifting because it was also optimistic. So, yeah, there was some sadness, but I knew Sam was still around. And I have evidence of that, as a matter of fact. There's a story about that. So overall, I just couldn't see anything to be devastated over. Only happy that he was now in a wonderful place, that he's still hanging around, and that I could move on and have this great um, sort of alternative plan B life. And it's been pretty spectacular overall.
Wow. And that is such a different perspective than, a lot of people take, especially when you lose someone. And I was telling you earlier that, I lost a fiance and it was every day got better, but I think it probably took me a couple years to really process that.
Mhm.
And where I even felt like I was able to even start dating again. And it just took me time because even the thought of dating, I was thinking I'm cheating, even though you can't really cheat on someone who's dead, right? But, I,
Well, people think you can. See, people have all this guilt. You have this guilt because our culture conditions us to awfulize death and to give the event a certain amount of time before we move on. That's cultural conditioning. But I say, after these insights that I was blessed with, I say, why? There's no reason for that. There really isn't, because I now know that souls in the afterlife don't experience negative emotions. They don't get jealous. They don't experience anger. They only want what will make us the happiest. Um, it's really wonderful. So So when you look at it this way, you know that, let me just tell you one thing. One lady said, okay, that's all well and good, but if I have another relationship, then I'm faced with my husband in the afterlife watching me if I, enter into a sexual relationship with a new partner at some point. She said, I said, yes, he'll be watching and he'll be cheering you on
Mhm.
because they don't experience negative emotions. They're surrounded by and numerous near-death experiences will attest to this. These souls are surrounded by the most unbelievable love that we can't even comprehend here on earth. And so many religious people, Christians mostly, I guess, they nod knowingly when I say these things. Yet that cultural conditioning is so strong that when the time comes for them to experience a loss, they may enter into this deep grief, this complex grief where you roll up into a ball and don't emerge for quite a while, even though they know better on some level. And so I want to get the message out there so that people start to connect the dots from knowing and actually acting on it. That makes sense?
Mhm.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
if we're thinking about, one day we're going to lose someone, um, how did you kind of compartmentalize your life to do some fun things out with people and then have that time, that process time alone? And did you structure that process time in any way to make it more productive or um, more light compared to just being home and thinking about it?
It's a great question. It doesn't even have to be time really spent alone. You could be hiking or taking a walk with a friend. If there's some quiet time in there, if it's not a friend that's gabbing at you all the time, I guess that counts as alone time. You just need to be sort of in a state where things can come together, where you're not overwhelmed with outside input. So it could be a walk, a hike, sitting alone in your home. You could even be reading. It just needs to be sort of quiet time. Maybe that's a better word for it, quiet time rather than alone time. Um, because if you keep yourself super busy, you really don't have time for things to kind of coalesce. And you need for them to do that. And it takes some time. So this was a brilliant way for me to proceed forward, and I can only imagine that it would work for others. I know it has actually already. People have told me, people who I know, and they've said, I kind of took your advice, and I don't know how it would have been if I hadn't, but all I can say is I got through this better and faster than I otherwise would have.
Mm, yeah.
So yeah,
'Cause yeah,
yeah.
the word that comes up for me is survivor's remorse, you know what I mean? You're thinking, "Why them?" You're thinking all these things, and, where, like you said, all they want for you is to be happy and to move on and do something fun in your life. So, when you started getting these, I guess you call them downloads of positive messages, tell me about that, and what did that look like? Like, what kind of things were you being told?
What it looked like was just, how throughout life we all kind of have a thunderbolt of wisdom, maybe once every 10 or 20 years. I mean, it doesn't happen very often.
Mhm.
And you think, oh, I mean, it's more often than that. It's probably every 3 or 4 years, or maybe even once a year. I don't know. But they come not real often, and you think, wow, it's like a light goes on in your head and you think, wow, I don't come up with things like that very often, and that could be really helpful in life. Okay. So this was happening more often than that, a lot more often than that. And I'm thinking, this has to be coming from outside of myself because it just doesn't think, I mean, maybe when you get those thunderbolts of wisdom every 5 years or something, maybe that comes from outside you too. I don't really know the process for sure. I just know that I'm not used to having these kinds of insights very often, and I was having them fairly often. Like, and maybe it was because of reading about the neurosurgeon's near-death experience. That story really got me thinking in a whole new way. And maybe that's why all this happened so quickly. Um, the insights about death and loss, where we awfulize them, and there's no reason to if you have a certain set of beliefs. And so, that's most of it. It came in pieces, however, but I wanted to give you the kind of the end point of it, which was this new way of thinking about death and loss. And yeah, they just came to me like lights going on in your head.
Mhm. And do you think was coming from Sam on the other side, just like helping you with things? Because I know there's been times, and not as much now because it's been a few years, where, but sometimes now I'll talk to my ex-fiance or my grandmothers or whatever. Even though they're somewhere else, I'm hoping heaven, I still talk to them, and I think they
Yeah,
hear me.
I think they do too. It's funny, we're not used to saying these wonderful things and not like having what we intend to be a conversation, but not getting the other side back, at least not very often. Occasionally I've gotten a symbol, like a serendipitous event that's just too many of them to chalk up to just coincidence. Like when I was on my way to Sam's first celebration of life, I had one in LA, but I had one here in our little town in Arizona. We had made a lot of friends here, even though we hadn't been here very long. And Sam's favorite flower had been sunflowers. And so I was going to have them on the tables at the place where I held this celebration of life that was too big to have at the house. I'm on my way, I'm almost there, and suddenly there's this really kind of funny looking, bright blue little tiny car in front of me. I don't know what it was, but the closest thing to it, I guess, would be a Volkswagen Bug. And up from the roof of that car is a plastic flower, and it's bent back toward me so I could clearly see it wasn't just any flower, it was a sunflower. And I thought, what are the chances of that 45 minutes before Sam's celebration of life?
Mhm.
That was, yeah, and other things like that have happened. And plus I get visits from Sam every night when I turn out the lights. There's this, I tell the story in the book of this smoky grayish white thing I started seeing almost immediately after he passed, but I wasn't sure it was really there because it was usually so subtle in intensity, and I thought, Vicki, this is pathetic. You're imagining this because you want Sam to still be around. But then a few months later, it changed color
Hmm.
to a neon yellow green.
Wow.
And sometimes it would be very vivid. Anyway, to make a long story short, about a year after Sam passed, and I had started praying for the first time in my life. It just amounted to me talking to God mostly, but occasionally I'd ask for things for other people. It didn't feel right to ask for anything for myself. So a year after Sam passed, I was talking to God early in the day for once. And I said, listen, tonight when I go to bed, God, I have something, a favor to ask you. I'm really growing weary of wondering if the neon yellow green thing is a manifestation of Sam's soul. I really need to know if it's Sam. So I have an idea. This is what you can do. I said, you can make the neon yellow green thing when I turn out the lights tonight. You can make it more vivid than ever or make it move differently. Usually it just kind of floated around gently, or kind of go in and out gently. And it wouldn't appear for 3 to 5 until about 3 to 5 minutes after I turned out the lights. I'm just relaxing. I haven't fallen asleep yet. So I said, and if it's not Sam's soul, if you would just give me jet black to indicate the definite absence of the phenomenon, and that'll tell me this hasn't been Sam all this time. If it appeared the way it always did, I figure, God had chosen not to do as I'd asked, and I'd be no worse off. So that night, it's getting to be bedtime, and I think, what have I done? What if I get jet black? Am I ready to find out this hasn't been Sam all this time? Can't stay up forever. So I reluctantly get into bed and turn out the lights. And immediately, the neon yellow green thing is there, as vivid as I'd ever seen it, maybe more so. Instead of waiting 3 to 5 minutes to appear, it's there immediately. And instead of floating gently around or in and out, it frantically goes across my view about 4 or 5 times in a second or two, and then gone. So I burst into tears and thank God. I probably should have thanked Sam, because I have a feeling this was Sam expending all his soul's energy in one, decisive display. Probably, was painful actually. And I thanked God for having confirmed the identity of the apparition, I guess. And I still get these visits pretty much every night, almost every night. So I say Sam's hanging around, I don't really get messages or anything, but I do get the neon yellow green thing.
Mhm. And that,
Yeah.
and that's comforting. I mean, even if you don't see something, it's comforting to know that they're still there, because when their body and brain dies, it's pretty devastating. You're like, they're gone. I'm not going to hug them anymore. I'm not going to physically talk to them anymore. I mean, I've heard other people say this, and this is what I miss the most is, every morning we talk on the phone. And so then you go to call and you think, oh, I can't call because
Yeah.
they're not going to answer. So just the knowingness that, our souls are eternal. And so we're not really left alone or abandoned. They're just in a different form somewhere else, but they're still around.
Yeah, but what you said is the reason we have to process the loss, because it creates a massive change to our life, and we don't know what that next chapter of life is going to look like. And, as human beings, we fear the unknown.
Mhm.
So, that's the part you got to process. And you can also know that someday you'll join your loved one in the afterlife,
Mhm.
and you can talk to them again then. And really, one thing that's been pointed out to me fairly recently is this message really doesn't just apply to losing someone, to someone passing. It applies to all kinds of adversity we face in life. It's part of God's plan. So the best thing you can do when even a really serious adverse event happens, like what if your house burnt down? I mean, that's very traumatic. But don't forget to think, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this?
Mhm.
God is teaching me a lesson. All of these things have lessons, and I am usually able to figure it out, what the lesson is in an adverse circumstance for me. Oh, God is once again trying to teach me about patience. Maybe I should finally learn this lesson, because God has been testing my patience for decades. Why don't I just learn the lesson and get more patient?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're speaking, that reminds me, some people may know this lady. She's a she's an evangelist, Joyce Meyer, and she's dealt with her temper and her wanting to be in control her whole life. And her husband's real laid back, and she's like, I have to go in the bathroom and scream and yell and hit the towel rack. And, and, I mean, and she's doing the best she can to be in the will of God and obey God, but we all have our things we need to learn, and that was hers. But we all have things that, man, God keeps sending us lessons and we just still keep kind of failing at it. We get maybe hopefully a little bit better each time.
Yeah, but you can get better each time if you understand, this is another insight that I was blessed with. If you understand that each time there's one of these adverse events and God is trying to teach you the lesson, you better figure out what it is. If you will just learn it, he will stop trying to teach you that particular lesson. And that's one type of adverse event that might stop happening to you. So, we're here to learn, we're here to teach, and we're here to experience. And if Sam passed ahead of me, God has a plan for me to do more.
So now at this point, what do you think you're supposed to be doing right now? What things are you doing right now? What things do you think you're supposed to be doing right now?
We moved to Arizona for retirement. I am hardly retired. I am on, 2 or 3 podcasts a week. I'm applying to be on podcasts. I'm writing emails to my email list, and they're pretty good. You guys should get on my list to get my audio episodes because my emails are really fun. Uh, um, I'm doing that. I'm traveling like crazy. I am seeing someone new, and it did take me a while to feel ready for that. It took me a year and 7 months before I would even entertain the notion. So that I wasn't ready for right away, but it's okay. So yeah, life is good. It's not great 100% of the time, but that's just because life, not for anybody, isn't great 100% of the time. But I am completely at peace now with Sam having passed ahead of me. And I was from almost the beginning, which is what's so stunning about my story. And the things I've said here today are the reasons why. And so I have been chosen to be the messenger, and I want to get this message out to help other people. This is something that God has done too. I am not a helpful type by nature. I see people caregiving and really sacrificing their lives to help others, and I've never been able to understand it. So God has given me this task of getting this message out there as a way to help people. And he's made it something that I could really embrace and enjoy and do well. And I thought, thank you, because I'm tired of seeing myself as totally self-involved. You've given me something to do, and I'm taking it and spending at least a year doing it. And I am happy to do it, even though I'm supposed to be retired. Okay, so I have a new job, and it doesn't make me very much money, but I don't care because the whole point is to help others. And I finally have a way that I feel comfortable and able to do that.
I love that. Good.
Yeah, me
Wonderful.
too.
So, you started out as a mechanical engineer,
Yeah,
and then, you discovered singing, and then in your bio it says you play violin, and then you're a critic for the theater in LA.
I was. Yeah.
How does all this come together to create who you are right now?
Well, if you talk to a lot of engineers, you'll find that they're so, is that left brain? I
Left
people
brain.
seem to know that, but I can never get it straight. Okay, so that's a left brain thing, very analytical, logical, good at math, all that stuff. Most engineers have taken something creative on, or musical, or artistic in some way, because somehow there's a need when you're very one-sided to do something that balances that out. I don't know if that's the case with everyone who kind of tends toward one extreme, but I think it's the case with most. And in my case, I started playing the violin when I was 7 years old, joined the school orchestra. And, I've just kind of been playing violin ever since. I don't practice very much anymore, but I play in our local Pops Symphony Orchestra. I have a concert this weekend, as a matter of fact. And it's good. It's never been my passion. Singing, however, is, and that's such a blessing because I've started doing that relatively late in life. I'm pretty decent at it, and I love it. It really just fills up my soul, and the theater reviewing. I've always loved theater, and I would go to theater, and then when our local paper needed a theater reviewer, I thought, well, maybe I should call them and offer my services and see what they say. And they gave me an assignment that say, well, this is a test. So here's an assignment, go see this play and write it up. And I didn't know what I was doing, but, and not to get into a big story about it, which I won't, I did it for over 20 years for this little paper in Signal Hill, California, which is in the Long Beach area. So when it came time to write the book, I had the writing skills. And anyway, to answer your question, yes, it's just a natural for someone who's a mechanical engineer to want to do something creative or artistic. So I love writing and I love singing. And I play violin, even though I don't love it.
So cool. Is there anything else that you would like people to know as far as going through this process of losing someone or adversity? Any other things any advice you would tell them about that?
Yes, absolutely. I think I kind of touched on these things, but let me make them really clear. So, as far as adversity is concerned, always try and remember to think, what is God trying to teach me in putting me through this? It's not going to make it all better. I mean, if your house burns down, it's still going to be traumatic, but there's a lesson in it. Figure out what it is. It's really not that hard if you're at all self-aware. Think about what that will be. It will really help. And as far as losing someone, a loved one passing, be open to guidance. I describe that, being flooded with optimism on the day Sam passed. It was like a helping hand was coming down from somewhere outside of myself because I'm not that optimistic. I'm not really pessimistic, but I'm kind of middle of the road. And so I was being guided and I let myself be led. Be open to guidance, be open to the possibilities that may come your way. And don't feel that guilt that so many do about thinking it's too soon. You can process the loss while you're embracing new opportunities, and that balance will really help. And that gets me to my final tip. Strike that balance between activity and, we decided not to call it alone time. We decided to call it
Time.
quiet time. Strike that balance. It will do you a world of good to move on almost immediately to doing fun things and to connecting with others and trying something new and maybe traveling to some place you might not have gone otherwise while you are spending the quiet time processing.
Beautiful. So if people
Yeah.
wanted to connect with you, where do they find you? Where do they find your book?
Okay, well, I'm hoping you'll put some of this in the show notes, Kimberly. Okay, good. So I have a website where there's some blog articles that are fun, VickiParisGoodman.com, and Kimberly will put it on the show notes, as well as my domain inspiredgrief.com. Go there now before you get distracted by life. Go there and put in your first name and email address to subscribe, to get on my email list, to get those great emails I put out 3 times a week. And the audio episodes, they are free and they are packed with fantastic content that they're only 12 to 15 minutes each, and there are 3 of them. Okay, so they don't take long to listen to, and they're my gift to you. Go and get them by subscribing at inspiredgrief.com. Lastly, my book, To Sam with Love, A Surviving Spouse's Story of Inspired Grief. is discounted. It's the best pricing currently available is at inspiredgrief.com/book. So that's it. That's where people can reach me. And I think at inspiredgrief.com and my website, both places you can contact me. There's a contact form on both.
All right. Well, thank you. So,
Yeah.
I have a personal question. What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Oh boy. I think singing.
Mhm.
I actually wrote a blog article about the way I feel when I sing. It just does something for my soul. It speaks to me more than anything else. And there are also some classical music pieces I love to listen to that do the same thing. They just fill me up. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thanks for being on the podcast today and sharing your wisdom, really different wisdom than a lot of times what we hear.
That's why I'm trying to get the message out there, Kimberly, because it is a unique message. Yeah. And it's really been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, I have one last question before we finish. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Well, I don't know if I've even succeeded in that yet, but I think I'm on my way. I think maybe getting outside one's comfort zone, but not too far, because I think that's harmful when you scare the bejesus out of yourself and make yourself so anxiety ridden that you can barely see straight. No, push it a little bit. Say, I want to do that, but I've always been a little bit afraid. Maybe I can just do it. Stretch it just a little bit. And the feeling from doing something you didn't really think you could do is probably the best feeling I've ever had in the world. So that's what I would recommend.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Vicki.
Yeah. Thank you,
We'll,
Kimberly.
we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.